Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Films Not Movies podcast. I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Arron.
So we decided to do this podcast because we both love films, basically.
Yeah.
And we used to go to the cinema quite a lot, do the old Orange Wednesday. We both work in the city centre in Manchester and used to watch films quite a lot. And I feel like we've got out of the habit and we want to watch more films and we want to talk about films and make our own podcast.
Yep.
Arron, you listen to quite a lot of podcasts, don't you?
Yes. So I basically pretend to be really knowledgeable about films by just stealing other people's opinions and then feeding them back to Charlotte. So this is where
I'm always really impressed.
So this is where I'll get found out, or I'll have to start coming up with my own ideas, which, well, we'll see how that goes.
Okay, so the films... let's talk about the name of the podcast. So we've decided to call it Films Not Movies.
Yeah. The name sounds a bit like we're having a go at the word movies, which I don't think that is really what it is. It's just, it seems that everyone now says the word movies instead of films. And I just think the word film is better as representative of, I don't know if it's just an English thing or... Well,
I think we were talking earlier about movies and how we don't mind the term movies in the terms of it was a blockbuster movies or, Hollywood movies or kind of that kind of glossy, that's a movie. But generally, the word is film.
Yeah.
But
go and watch a film. Don't go and watch a movie.
But also, I think we both find the term movies quite funny when you think about it. It's a bit like how they used to say going to the talkies, didn't they? It's a moving picture. It moves.
Yeah.
It's a movie.
Yeah. People think that the word pictures is really, going to the pictures is really dated. But movies sounds exactly the same to me as pictures. Like
it's moving pictures.
If pictures is out of date, then movies is just out of date with films. I mean, okay, maybe that's out of date because...
They're not on films anymore.
Well, some are, but...
Some are.
Mostly digital. So maybe we should call it digital, not film. No. Films, not movies, for now.
It'll do. Okay, so the first film that we're going to talk about today is Arrival.
Yes. Arrival is directed by Denis Villeneuve and starring Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner.
And we both love a bit of sci-fi, don't we? So we're quite excited to see this one. I'd have to say it didn't disappoint.
Yes. I'd heard good things before going into it, which sometimes the expectation ends up ruining films for me, but I enjoyed that it was, I don't want to sound annoying, but kind of like a thinking man's sci-fi film. It wasn't, if you went in expecting Star Wars or something like that, and I love Star Wars, it's very different, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that made it interesting to me, because one of the things about alien contact is they tend to always go the same way. So it's really refreshing that somebody has thought about it not always ending in big cataclysms and special effects.
Yeah, so I guess we should say the basic outline of the story. We're going to try our best to not spoil anything on the podcast, but obviously talking about the themes of things, you'll understand some of what the plot has gone on. But basically, there are numerous alien craft, and this all happens in the first part of the film, so this isn't spoiling anything, land around the globe in different locations, and they have no way of communicating with these aliens other than they make
weird noises
that don't mean anything to us.
More like a raw animal kind of noise, which anyone would struggle to decipher.
Yeah.
So they call upon the number one linguistics expert, who is played by Amy Adams, and then they also have a guy who's some kind of physicist.
Is he a physicist, something like that? Who's played by Jeremy Renner, who, if you don't recognise the name...
The arrow guy.
Yeah, the guy who shoots the arrows in...
all the Marvel stuff. We're not massive Marvel fans.
As you can tell. But and he was also in the Bourne
stuff.
When Bourne wasn't Matt Damon anymore, it was Jeremy Renner for a bit, and then Matt Damon came back again because he wasn't action enough. So he probably fits this role as being a bit more of a quieter, more...
Not an action man type.
Not an action man type. Pretty well, I think.
And I think they were both very well cast in this, really, and it kind of made them more believable, really, that both of them, neither of them, obviously Amy Adams is very beautiful, but she is a bit more of a normal looking person and she seemed more relatable, that she is, she's there for her brains and her talent, and, obviously she's pretty at the same time, but it's not like, oh my God, she's not a real person. She's a Hollywood megastar. So it did seem they were more convincing in that way, I felt.
Yes, and I think one of the things about Arrival for me and Amy Adams as being normal and Jeremy Renner seeming more normal than your movie stars is that because the story is quite condensed to a few characters, really. It's on a global scale what they're doing, but a lot of the story is very condensed, mainly on Amy Adams, to be honest. It's her film. She is the star, and it makes it quite a humanist story with just a sprinkling of sci-fi. And on the most part, I find, is that it's really kind of almost a character piece about her character and her journey to basically trying to crack this alien language. It's just on the side. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's a really interesting study on humans as much as it is on aliens, really, because obviously the alien beings are very fascinating, and they are brilliant in not showing them too much. It's sort of that classic horror film thing for me, where the more you see, the less effective and less scary it becomes, because the point of a horror film is to scare you, and then when you see too much, there's no mystery anymore. So I kind of like the way that the aliens are not too in your face. It doesn't show up any effects for being not good enough. But going back to the human side of things, you know, it's her frustration at how the world of politics interferes with what she wants to do, and people's human instincts about kind of their reaction to alien life arriving on Earth. And it, especially in the times that we're in now, the state of the human race, thought that was very interesting and pretty much how it probably would play out from that side of things. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said that in this time, it's almost this film has accidentally come out at the perfect time possible, where obviously a lot of people aren't happy with the political climate around the world and in this country. And it is almost a film about people needing to work together and the barriers that come with that. And I don't know, it almost felt like the perfect kind of escapism, but almost on quite a real level, where obviously aliens aren't invading here at the moment, I don't think. But it's all almost quite relatable to how the world works now, which you can't say of a lot of sci-fi films. Maybe more recently, you get these kind of, I mean, the first half of Interstellar has that kind of feeling to it, where it almost feels like it could happen, as opposed to something that's a bit more out there.
Yeah, a few people have compared it to Interstellar, haven't they? And I think there are similarities in a lot of ways. We're not massive fans of Interstellar. I think for both of us, it lost it towards the end and went a step too far.
Yeah.
And there was a moment in this film, we're not going to give anything away, but as things start to resolve, there was a moment when I was worrying, is this going to go Interstellar? Is this plot device going to be is it going to get too silly? Is it going to lose me when it's had me completely hook, line and sinker all the way through? But it didn't. It just stayed on the right side of things to keep you fully believing that this could absolutely happen, which made it a much more successful film from my point of view.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with the direction of the film, Denis Villeneuve, who said before, I think he has quite an understated feel to this film, and the way he explores the subject matter, it would have been very surprising for it to descend into an Independence Day style sci-fi romp. I mean, there's still lots of exciting things happening. I mean, comparing it to Sicario, which is the last film that he directed before this, and we just happened to watch.
Yeah, on Netflix.
Recently, so that's on Netflix if you want to watch it. It's a crime thriller. And again, the main thing I would say about it is that it follows a few characters incredibly closely, and it's really understated in the way that it does it. I mean, it's this huge scale crime thriller, essentially, but it seems so compact and focused on a few people and a few key ideas that if you weren't paying attention, the film would, both of these films could pass you by without you really thinking anything happened. But if you're paying attention, all the details are so key to how they play out. And
it is the normality of the main characters, which, you know, they both have cliched phrase strong female lead, but they do, but they're very normal characters, even though they are amazingly both amazingly skilled and talented in their own fields, the lead in Sicario and the lead in Arrival, but they're not wacky, zany characters, the people who you could believe that you could meet and are actually like that, which makes them more identifiable, I think.
Yeah.
So should we talk about the language a little bit in
Yeah.
Arrival? Because obviously that is a very strong theme. Amy Adams' character is there to try and communicate with these creatures.
Yeah. I think the way they handle trying to work out what the aliens are saying take up a lot of the kind of narrative of the earlier part of the film is them trying to decipher, and the way they built this alien language and the way they describe it and the way they go about trying, it all seems very precise and scientific. It seems like a lot of thought has gone into this, where they haven't just thrown in some plot device to kind of say, this is how we understand them now. It's very precise.
Like, really, it's a very difficult thing to do in a film, really. I mean, it's a near impossible task to try and understand what a completely alien race is saying. It's like trying to decipher what your cat is trying to tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, obviously they've had to speed things up a lot and a bit of montaging going on. But again, I think they pitched the balance just right, where they didn't go too technical or too patronising, whereas obviously they've got to assume that things have moved along quickly and you don't see every breakthrough. And, you know, I found it really interesting, actually. And I write for a living and I find the word side of things quite interesting. And I found it quite interesting the way their language looked in the written form and the way they talked about how these aliens, what came out of their, well, not really mouths, but the sounds they made. And their written language are two different things. And I have heard that there are people in this world that communicate that way, where they're not hands-on just waving around, which is what I'm frantically doing right now, because I do that all the time. It kind of gets lost in a podcast. But yeah, I find that really interesting too.
Yeah, I think some of your flappy hands will be picked up from banging the microphone
Probably.
every once in a while, so apologies if there are any unusual bonks. Okay, so is there anything else about Arrival you want to talk about?
I don't think so, because I don't want to give too much away, really.
Yeah, so I guess we should decide how we're going to recommend these films. So this is being a thought process coming at you live. Are we going to rate films, or are we just going to recommend them or not recommend them?
I don't know. Do you want to rate them?
I think ratings can be, especially because your opinion on a film might not be the same. So
Okay. What are we going for? Out of 5?
well, we'll do an out of 5 each for now, and
Okay. We'll see how it gets on.
And-
Work in progress.
sometimes just an opinion is enough to decide whether it sounds like it's something for you. So for me, out of 5 stars, I'd give it 4. I think it's a film definitely worth seeing at the cinema. Something, if you have seen Sicario and enjoyed it, then it'll be a perfect film for you. But it's also great for if you've liked any of the other sci-fi films, or been even interested in any of the big sci-fi films that have been a bit more thought-provoking style, something like the first hour and a half of Interstellar or Gravity, something like that.
Yeah, I absolutely love Gravity, and I love this too. But this has a lot more to it, really. Gravity is a very visual
Yes.
and action-based film, although not action in the sense of an action film with
Yeah.
explosions and stuff. Well, it kind of is, but you're just very much gripped moment to moment in the actual what's happening live on
The
screen.
unfolding of the story. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas Arrival is very much more of a plot.
Yeah.
And one of the things that makes it so great is the things that you don't see coming about it. You know, some films you can predict what is going to happen, how it's all going to resolve, but you totally don't have that with Arrival. And that's one of the things that made it so good for me. I would also give it a solid 4 out of 5.
Yeah. Excellent.
So go and see it.
Yes. And I imagine it'll be in cinemas for a while because I think it has been quite popular. Okay, so the next film we're going to talk about is South Korean film by director, excuse my pronunciation, Sang-ho Yeon, and it's called Train to Busan.
Yes. Now, we went to see this film and I knew absolutely nothing about it. Yeah. But as I've said, you know, Arron generally hears more about films than I do, heard about it, knew we had to go and see it, took me to go and see it. And literally all I knew was it was called Train to Busan. So somewhere in the back of my mind, I had this, it was going to be some sort of Darjeeling Limited, quirky train across the country kind of thing. Little did I know it was an epic zombie movie.
Yeah, I think,
which was awesome.
yeah. I mean, in a way, knowing it's a zombie film, it's not a spoiler, but I would have loved to have gone into it not knowing it was a zombie film at all, like Charlotte did,
Yeah.
because I could tell it was just such a ridiculous surprise. The film's setup is that it's a father and daughter need to go on a train journey from the capital of South Korea, Seoul, to Busan, which looking at afterwards is quite a long train journey. So them going on this train journey and then encountering large swathes of zombies made for quite a long time. They need to keep these feral beasts at bay. I think zombie films were completely overdone a few years ago, to the point, especially with TV shows like The Walking Dead, which a lot of people love. I've never quite connected with it. It has great moments in it, but I think maybe it just came at the wrong time for me, where I was kind of already a bit done with zombie films. So when I heard this was a zombie film, I was thinking, where can they go with it? But I think they do a really good job of, even though it's a conventional, the zombies are here, we need to defend ourselves against them, it's almost in the same way I said about Arrival. It's the normalness of the people who were there.
Yeah.
They're just normal people on the train. They've not got a large military presence on the train that just happens to be really useful and can keep... I mean, these aren't really spoilers because it's not really going into the plot at all, but...
Yeah, they're just normal people taking a train.
Yeah, taking a train.
It's not snakes on a plane, it's zombies on a train.
Yeah. But a lot of people have called it that, but I'd say that I mean, snakes on the plane isn't anywhere near as bad as people say it is, but the way is very...
It's very well crafted, I think, because you get... And I think all good... I guess this is a horror film, but what is most important, I think, or not most important, but very important in a horror film, is that you get the normality at the beginning of the horror film. So you've got a contrast. You know, you don't plunge straight into blood, gore, and terror. You have the classic example for me is The Exorcist, where if you didn't have that bit of family life of the mother and the daughter, and you know, just getting on with things, and then the slow descent into all the stuff that happens, the horrible stuff wouldn't seem quite so horrible because it's kind of, we're just getting on with things at the beginning and then it goes down.
Yes, and I think the story and the relationship between the father and the daughter, which is very dysfunctional.
And she's quite little, isn't she? So she's not old enough to take the train on her own to go to her mother's. So he goes with her, and she's I'm really bad at guessing kids' ages. 6 or 7, something like that?
Yes, roughly. I probably would have said eight, but 8 at a maximum. So very young isn't someone who you would put on a 5-hour train journey or however long it is on her own.
And she is great. She is a brilliant actor.
Yeah, and I can't remember ever watching a zombie film that I had such an emotional reaction from it by the end, because it is quite a journey that they go on.
In both senses of the word.
In both senses of the word. Maybe even 3 senses of the word. Is that it's a long way. They go through a lot of stuff, but they also, their relationship and their story is almost as key to anything else that happens, I would say. I guess we'd go into a little bit of character of him. He's like a hardworking businessman, trader type person, so works long hours, doesn't have a great relationship with her. She's going on this train to go back to her mother, and he's going with her because obviously you can't leave her on her own to get this train.
Yeah, it's her birthday and she just wants to go and see her mum. Yeah. Even though he's reluctant to because he's so busy. Going back to the film as a whole, you know, one of the things about zombie films is, and a lot of horror films, is how do you keep it going? How do you keep the pace going? And I felt that the pace in this film was just so perfectly done, whereby there was never too much zombie carnage. And then when there was a moment where they were on top of things, you had just enough time for your heartbeat to settle back down. And then the next thing would happen. But it didn't seem like, another thing. It was just perfectly pitched for me, where the suspense and the action was just right so that you never got bored and you never got overload either. It was really well made and I really enjoyed it. But it's funny, when I was thinking about the 2 films that we were going to talk about today, thinking how completely different they were. But actually, having just said what we've just said about Arrival and how it's really about humanity and how humans would react when there's something else in the mix, whether that be aliens or zombies. Yeah. I do think Train to Busan also is really an interesting look at humanity as well, because there's a kind of little theme running through it of do you look after number one
Yeah.
or do you look after everybody?
Okay. Yeah. A big picture type thing. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say they were companion pieces.
No, definitely not.
Because one thing that Train to Busan is very different to Arrival in is that I wouldn't say it's understated in the way that it treats the subject matter of zombies. They are brutal.
Yeah.
It's extremely violent. If you're squeamish at all, then you will probably struggle. And it's very, I don't know, visceral is probably the word I'm thinking of, where it is so hand to hand. There isn't really weaponry involved other than just what they find on the train. So there's a lot of really people just fighting for their lives to avoid these zombies. And then, as you were saying before, people working together or working as a team is quite a theme that runs throughout the
or
film.
looking after themselves. So whereas in Arrival, it was very much the nations, do the nations work together or do the nations look after themselves and, screw everybody else? Whereas in Train to Busan, there is, all zombies aside, one of the best baddies, as in the most horrible baddies.
Yeah.
The kind of baddie that you want to get it so bad.
Yeah.
A real
Love to hate.
nasty Nick, times 10 million. Every film needs a good villain.
Yeah.
And this guy, oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, you would root for the zombies ahead of rooting for this guy.
When you watch it, you'll know who we're talking about.
Oh, I don't doubt anyone would not work that out. So, yeah, probably talk about this one a bit less than Arrival. So, unless there's anything major else you want to mention about it.
No, other than I'm not going to say what happens at the ending, but I really enjoyed the ending.
Yeah.
Because there was a number of routes they could have taken, I felt, with it.
Yeah, this is true.
And I felt that they did a really good job of, just giving a satisfying ending without making it cheesy either.
Yeah.
But that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. And it's just really awesome.
Yeah.
As not from the same country, but the film, even though it's not a zombie film, that it reminded me of in terms of the action levels and the quality of the action is, yes, it's the Indonesian film, The Raid.
Yeah.
Especially the first one, which has a lot more kind of, not lo-fi feel to it, but a lot more kind of confined to one tower block. This confined essentially to one train. So if you enjoyed that, or if you've heard that that's good, this is in the similar vein to that. So on that note, what would you rate this one?
I would also give this a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, we're not going to give every film 4 out of 5, but I would also give it 4 out of 5. It's been a great couple of films that we've seen. Unfortunately, I don't think this one is still available to see in cinema. It might be in some smaller ones. We saw it at home in Manchester, which is named the cinema, not our actual house. But they've stopped showing it, but other cinemas might show it. But it's the kind of one I imagine might come around to Netflix or something relatively soon, because I imagine it'll be popular, but might not have a huge DVD release. Yeah, so 4 out of 5 if I didn't already say that.
Yes. And we are picky about films. So in this podcast, we're not going to go and see crap for the sake of reviewing it. Although I imagine it's quite fun to review a bad film.
Yes, and it looks like there's quite a few bad films at the moment, or ones that I think at least look bad. So I think for now, this will be the end of this podcast. But in future, we'll try and keep episodes coming, even if we're not reviewing essentially new films at the cinema. We might just revisit old classics, or just things that are new to either Netflix or new DVD releases. There's certainly a backlog of things that we've got to watch, or other films we could talk about. But we will try and, as we mentioned at the start, get to the cinema and have more films to talk about. Yeah.
So thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the first episode. We are total noobs at this, so forgive us if it's not been super shiny.
Yeah.
And please come back and listen to the next one.
Yeah. This has been Films Not Movies. Goodbye.
Bye.